in a quiet Florida suburb, where the streets curved gently around man-made lakes, and the air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen, Tom's days moved at a slow and steady rhythm. His house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac lined with palm trees that whispered softly when the evening breeze rolled in from the Gulf. Tom wasn't the kind of man who liked arguments. He worked from home, kept his yard tidy, and waved to neighbors he barely knew. He loved his small world of routine: morning coffee on the porch, soft country music playing in the garage, and weekend fishing trips with his wife Ellen and their teenage son Noah. The family owned a modest white RV, parked neatly beside their driveway. It wasn't shiny or new. It had some fading decals, a few scratches from trips up the coast, and a faint smell of sea salt inside. For Tom, that RV wasn't just a vehicle, it was freedom on four wheels. Every long weekend, the family would load it up with fishing gear, folding chairs, and coolers full of sandwiches. They'd drive toward the coast, where the sunsets painted the water orange and pink. Back home, the RV sat still and quiet. Tom always made sure it didn't block the sidewalk or stick out past the hedges. He even trimmed the palms so they framed it neatly. The neighborhood, from the outside, looked perfect. Identical lawns, pastel houses, mailbox flags that all lifted in unison each morning. But beneath that perfection was something more rigid: the homeowners association. The HOA had rules for everything. Rules about mailbox color, hedge height, trash can placement, and even the shade of beige acceptable for exterior paint. Tom once laughed at those details when he first moved in. He thought the HOA existed just to keep things tidy. But soon, he'd learn it existed to control. It started on a humid Tuesday morning in late spring. The sky was pale blue, and a mockingbird was singing from a neighbor's oak tree when Tom walked down his driveway to check the mail. Among a few bills and a pizza flyer was a crisp white envelope with bold black letters: Homeowners Association Notice. He frowned, tore it open, and read the words that made his heart drop. Notice of violation. Section 14B, unauthorized vehicle storage. Please remove the recreational vehicle from your property within 72 hours to avoid penalties. Tom read it twice. He looked over at the RV, sitting quietly in the driveway, shining softly under the morning sun. Unauthorized. He'd parked it there for years. No one had ever complained. Ellen came out holding her coffee mug. "What's that?" "HOA notice," Tom said, handing it to her. "They're calling the RV unauthorized storage." She squinted at the paper. "Storage? It's not junk. We use it all the time." Tom nodded. "Exactly." 3 days later, a second letter arrived, this time with a fine. $500. The tone was firmer, colder. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties. Tom sat at the kitchen table, tapping the edge of the envelope against his thumb. Noah leaned over his cereal bowl, listening. "Dad, can they really fine you for that?" he asked. "They think they can," Tom said softly, "but I'm not paying just yet." That night, after the house grew quiet, Tom turned on the small lamp in his study and pulled out the thick HOA handbook he'd received years ago. The cover was faded, the corners curled. He started reading. Every clause, every rule, every comma. It was the kind of document few people ever looked at closely. He read about garbage collection times, roof shingle materials, acceptable porch lights. Then, deep in Section 14B, he found the rule in question. It read, "No recreational vehicle shall be parked in such a manner as to be visible from the street for more than 24 hours." He sighed. So technically, they were right, at least partly. But then, near the bottom of the page, a small paragraph caught his eye. "This restriction shall not apply to vehicles actively used for maintenance, loading, or travel preparation." Tom smiled faintly. He wasn't storing his RV. He was preparing it. The next day, he took photos of himself washing the RV, checking tire pressure, cleaning the awning. He printed timestamp pictures and tucked them into a folder labeled "Response to Violation." When the next HOA meeting rolled around, he put on a clean polo shirt, took a deep breath, and walked to the community clubhouse. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Folding chairs were arranged in rows. About 20 residents murmured softly, waiting for their chance to speak. At the front sat 5 board members behind a long table, papers stacked neatly in front of them. The president, Mrs. Dyer, was a retired schoolteacher known for her sharp memory and even sharper tone. When Tom's name was called, he stepped forward calmly. "Good evening," he began. "I'm here regarding the violation notice for my RV." Mrs. Dyer folded her hands. "Yes, Mr. Henderson. The RV visible from the street is in clear violation of Section 14B. Tom nodded. "I understand that section, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding." He placed the open handbook on the table, pointing to the small paragraph near the bottom. "It also says vehicles used for maintenance or travel preparation are exempt. I use my RV regularly for both. I clean it, check it, and prepare it for our trips." A few people in the audience nodded. Mrs. Dyer adjusted her glasses. That exception requires prior approval from the board. Tom stayed calm. "The handbook doesn't specify that. It just says the restriction doesn't apply." The treasurer, a younger man with a kind face, leaned forward. "Do you have evidence of regular use?" Tom opened his folder and handed over printed photos. "These were taken this week. You can see maintenance in progress. I can also show travel logs if needed." The room went silent for a moment. Mrs. Dyer cleared her throat. "We'll review this matter further." Tom thanked them and left quietly, heart steady, steps slow. Back home, he parked the RV exactly where it always stood. Ellen was waiting on the porch. "How'd it go?" she asked. He smiled. "We'll see, but I think the rules might finally work in my favor." For the next few days, he heard nothing. The neighborhood stayed the same. Lawns trimmed, sprinklers clicking in rhythm, evening joggers passing by. But inside Tom's house, there was a quiet tension, the kind that makes you notice every car that slows near your driveway. A week later, another letter arrived. Tom picked it up slowly. This one was thinner, lighter. He opened it at the mailbox, sunlight glinting off the paper. "After review, the fine has been rescinded. Please ensure visibility is minimized when possible." That was HOA language for "you were right, but don't rub it in." Ellen laughed when she read it. "So you won." Tom shrugged, smiling. "I think so." That evening, he moved the RV a few feet back, trimming the hedges taller on one side. He placed a few large potted palms near the edge to soften the view. To anyone walking by, it looked like part of the landscaping now. Neighbors stopped to chat more often after that. Mrs. Graves from across the street mentioned her mailbox color dispute. A young couple talked about getting cited for leaving their bikes near the garage. Everyone had a story. Tom realized how many of them had just paid the fines to avoid trouble. He told them gently, "Sometimes you just have to read what they wrote. The rules cut both ways." By the time summer rolled around, the RV gleamed brighter than ever. It became part of the neighborhood's quiet scenery again. A small white reminder that not every rule is as solid as it seems. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, Tom received an email from a neighbor he barely knew, named Ben. Ben lived a few streets over and had been fined for having his fishing boat in his driveway. "Heard you got your fine overturned," Ben wrote. "Mind sharing how you did it?" Tom invited him over. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, talking over iced tea. Tom showed him the exact line in the handbook, the photos, the calm letters. Ben took notes. 2 months later, another neighbor called. Then another. It turned out, more than a dozen people had received similar notices. Tom didn't plan it, but slowly, he became the quiet voice people went to when the HOA got too strict. "My name's Tom, and I live in a quiet suburb just outside Tampa, Florida. The kind of place where mornings smell faintly of orange blossoms and sprinklers hiss in unison down every street. The houses all look almost identical, with neat lawns and pastel paint, and the air hums with cicadas by mid-afternoon. I moved here 8 years ago with my wife, Linda, after retiring from 25 years in construction management. We wanted peace, a slower rhythm, somewhere we could walk the dog at sunset and actually hear our own footsteps. Back then, I thought homeowner associations were just friendly neighborhood committees that made sure the grass didn't grow too high. For a long time, that's exactly how it felt. The HOA newsletter came once a month with cheerful reminders about community picnics and bake sales. We waved to the neighbors, kept the lawn trimmed, and paid the annual dues without question. Life was easy, predictable, and maybe a little too perfect. Then came the RV. I'd spent years dreaming about owning one. After decades of hard work, I wanted to travel the country at my own pace, visit old friends, maybe camp near the Smoky Mountains. So when I finally bought a modest, used 30-foot RV, it felt like a reward for all those years of showing up early and staying late. The day I drove it home, kids stopped their bikes to watch. The sun caught the silver sides, and it gleamed like something out of a summer postcard. I parked it right in my driveway, beside the hibiscus bushes I'd planted myself. That first night, I sat inside the RV with a cup of coffee, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of palm leaves outside. It was perfect, or so I thought. The next morning, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. The HOA logo was printed neatly at the top. I didn't think much of it until I opened it and saw the fine: $200 for unauthorized vehicle storage. At first, I laughed. Surely, this was a misunderstanding. I'd read through the community guidelines once, and I didn't remember anything about RVs. Maybe they meant I couldn't block the sidewalk. Maybe it was just a warning. I decided to call the HOA office directly. A woman named Brenda answered. Her tone was polite, but distant. The kind of voice that sounded like it had repeated the same script 100 times before. "Yes, Mr. Walker," she said. "Per Community Code Section 7B, recreational vehicles may not be parked in driveways or visible from the street." I remember pausing, thinking she must be mistaken. Visible from the street? I repeated, "Brenda, it's parked in my own driveway. I'm not running a car lot." "I understand, sir," she replied evenly. "But visibility is part of the aesthetic compliance guidelines. You can keep it if you build an approved enclosure." An enclosure? For an RV? I almost dropped the phone. That night, I reread the HOA handbook cover to cover. Section 7B was right there, a single paragraph buried under exterior appearances. It stated, in legal language thicker than tar, that recreational vehicles of any type may not be stored or parked in any driveway where visible from public roads. For the first time, my peaceful little suburb didn't feel so peaceful. I paid the fine, figuring it would buy me time while I figured out what to do next. But a week later, another letter came. This one sterner. It warned of escalating penalties and potential legal action if the RV wasn't removed. Linda wanted to avoid trouble. "Tom," she said, "let's just rent a storage lot like everyone else." But to me, it wasn't just about storage. It was about principle. I'd spent years maintaining that house, mowing, painting, paying every bill on time. And now, because of some line buried in a booklet, I was being told I couldn't even keep something I owned on my own property. That thought kept me awake. The whir of the ceiling fan felt louder than usual, and outside, the RV gleamed under the porch light like a silent protest. The next morning, I decided I wouldn't back down. I started by talking to my neighbors. Some sympathized. Others looked uncomfortable, like they didn't want to be seen discussing HOA issues. One man, Greg, whispered, "You're not the first, Tom. A couple down the street got fined last year for hanging their kayak on the side fence." That caught my attention. If others had been fined, maybe there was a pattern, or better yet, a flaw. I began documenting everything. I photographed the RV from different angles, noting how part of it was hidden behind a palm tree. I even printed screenshots from Google Street View, showing that it was barely visible unless someone stood directly across the street. When the third letter came, this one demanding immediate removal, I decided to prepare a written appeal. I spent hours drafting it carefully, citing what I believed were inconsistencies between the HOA rule and the county's zoning code. Then I found something odd. While searching through old HOA meeting minutes online, I noticed that the RV clause had been amended 3 years ago during a meeting that never reached quorum, meaning not enough members attended for any official vote to count. It hit me like a spark in dry grass. The rule might not even be legally enforceable. I printed the record, highlighted the attendance notes, and sat back in my chair. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. The next day, I delivered my appeal in person at the HOA office. Brenda accepted the envelope with that same neutral expression. "We'll review it during the next board meeting," she said. I thanked her and left, but I could tell she didn't expect anything to come of it. A week later, I received an email inviting me to attend the upcoming HOA meeting to discuss your violation. It felt more like a summons than an invitation. Linda offered to come, but I told her I'd handle it. That night before the meeting, I took one last walk around the block. The neighborhood was peaceful. Porch lights glowed. Someone's sprinkler hissed faintly in the dark. I thought about how much I'd loved this place before the letter started. I didn't want to lose that feeling, but I also couldn't let this small injustice go unanswered. When I finally went to bed, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks, because now I had proof. The night of the HOA meeting, the clubhouse parking lot was half full, the air thick with that humid Florida warmth that never quite fades after sunset. Through the glass doors, I could see the board members sitting at a long folding table, papers stacked neatly, a pot of coffee steaming beside them. When my name was called, I stood and walked to the small microphone at the front. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. 5 faces looked back at me. Neighbors I'd waved to countless times, but never truly met. I started simply. "My name is Tom Walker, and I live on Magnolia Court. I'm here because I received 3 violation notices regarding my RV." A few nods, a few glances at their binders. I could almost hear the hum of the air conditioner. "I respect this neighborhood," I continued. "I've kept my home in good order for 8 years. I pay dues on time. I'm not trying to break rules. I just want clarity about whether those rules were even passed correctly." One of the board members, a tall man with silver hair named Dennis, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Walker, the rule against visible recreational vehicles has been in place for years. It's part of maintaining property values." "I understand," I said, "but the amendment that added Section 7B wasn't properly ratified. The minutes from the 2019 meeting show attendance below quorum. Without quorum, that amendment doesn't legally hold." For the first time, the room went quiet. Brenda, seated at the end of the table, frowned slightly and started flipping through a folder. "Do you have evidence of that?" I handed over the printed pages, highlighted in yellow. "Right there. Only 4 members attended. You needed 6. The silver-haired man leaned forward, scanning the paper. "Where did you get this?" "It's from the association's own website," I said gently. "Public records, accessible to any member." Murmurs rippled through the small audience. A woman in the back whispered something to her husband. Dennis sighed, tapping his pen against the table. "All right, Mr. Walker. We'll need to verify this with our legal counsel." "That's all I'm asking," I replied. "Verification." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Brenda cleared her throat. "We'll notify you in writing once the board reviews the minutes." I thanked them and returned to my seat. The meeting continued with other agenda items, lawn fertilizer guidelines, a request to repaint the pool fence, but I barely heard them. I sat quietly, hands folded, feeling the first small wave of relief. As I left, an older neighbor named Martha caught up to me in the hallway. "Tom," she said softly, "good for you. That rule's been a thorn in everyone's side." I smiled. "Let's see if it sticks." The next morning, I mowed my lawn as usual, pretending life was normal again. Birds hopped along the fence, the smell of cut grass mixing with sea breeze. The RV sat quietly in the driveway, a symbol of both freedom and defiance. A few days later, an envelope arrived, this time in blue ink instead of red. "Dear Mr. Walker," it began, "the board has reviewed your appeal and will postpone further action pending verification of meeting records." It wasn't a victory yet, but it was the first letter in weeks that didn't threaten me. Linda smiled when I showed her. "You did it," she said. "Not yet," I replied, "but maybe soon." I spent the next week researching HOA case law. You wouldn't believe how many homeowners had fought and won against rules that weren't properly passed. I learned that any amendment without quorum is voidable. I also discovered that the Florida Homeowners Association Act requires all rule changes to be filed with the county clerk within 90 days. Out of curiosity, I drove downtown to the clerk's office. The clerk, a friendly woman named Rosa, helped me search the public database. We scrolled through pages of filings, fencing ordinances, pool regulations, but Section 7B was nowhere to be found. Rosa looked up at me over her glasses. "If it's not here, sir, it was never recorded." That single sentence changed everything. I thanked her and left with printed proof. The warm air outside felt lighter, almost electric. The sun caught the courthouse windows like polished copper. Driving home, I couldn't stop smiling. For weeks, I'd felt small, boxed in by bureaucracy. Now, for the first time, I felt taller than the rule itself. That evening, I drafted a new letter, short and direct. I attached the county clerk's verification and requested that all fines be rescinded immediately due to procedural invalidity. I dropped it in the HOA's mailbox before sunset, feeling oddly calm, like setting down a burden. A few days passed quietly. Then, early one morning, I saw Dennis walking up my driveway in a polo shirt and sunglasses. I wiped my hands on a towel and met him halfway. "Morning, Tom," he said. "Got a minute?" "Of course." He gestured toward the RV. "Mind if we talk about this?" I nodded, and we both stood under the shade of the palm tree. "I looked into what you said," he continued. "You're right. The 2019 amendment wasn't filed properly. Technically, the rule's unenforceable." I waited, saying nothing. "That said," he added, "we're planning to re-vote on it next month to make it official. In the meantime, no further fines will be issued." I couldn't help but smile. "Appreciate that, Dennis." He smiled back, maybe grudgingly. "You made your point. Nicely done." When he left, I sat on the porch steps and just listened. To the cicadas, the faint rumble of traffic, the normal rhythm of life coming back. For the first time in months, I felt the neighborhood exhale. But peace never lasts long in a place run by paperwork. A week later, a new HOA newsletter arrived announcing a special vote to reauthorize the RV ban. The meeting was open to all residents. I knew then this wasn't over. That night, I walked the neighborhood again. Same soft air, same sprinklers hissing across manicured lawns. Only now, each porch light seemed to hold a question. Would my neighbors side with me, or with the board? I made a decision right there under the dim streetlight. If they were going to vote again, then I was going to speak again, louder, but still calm. This time, I wouldn't just defend my driveway. I'd defend the idea that homeowners should understand the rules before being punished by them. The following week, I printed 20 copies of the old meeting minutes and tucked them neatly into a folder. I wasn't planning to start a rebellion. I just wanted people to see the truth for themselves. Most of my neighbors were kind, reasonable people. They waved when I walked the dog, borrowed tools from my garage, and brought casseroles when Linda had her knee surgery. But the HOA had a way of making everyone cautious. People didn't want to speak up. They didn't want to get on the list. Still, when I knocked on a few doors that evening, I was surprised at how many quietly nodded as I explained the situation. "Tom," one woman said, "I thought that RV rule was silly from the start. My brother has one. He parks it when he visits, and it's never bothered anyone." Another neighbor, Brian, frowned when I mentioned the fines. "They fined me once for painting my mailbox the wrong shade of beige," he said. "If you're fighting back, you're not alone." By the time I got home, I'd spoken with 11 households. 9 said they'd attend the meeting. That was more than enough to make me hopeful. Linda watched me carefully as I spread my notes across the dining table. "You look like you're running for office," she said with a soft laugh. "Maybe I am," I smiled. "Just the office of common sense." The night of the vote came quicker than I expected. The community clubhouse glowed under the soft amber of porch lights, and rows of folding chairs filled the hall. A faint smell of coffee and copier ink hung in the air. People chatted quietly as the board members took their seats. I spotted Brenda again at the end of the table, tapping a pen against her notebook. Dennis stood in the middle, papers in hand, looking like a man who wanted to keep things civil. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Tonight's meeting concerns the reauthorization of Section 7B, the regulation on recreational vehicle visibility." A low murmur rippled through the room. Before he could continue, I raised my hand. "Dennis, may I speak?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead, Tom." I stood up and walked slowly to the microphone. My voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "I want to start by saying I love this neighborhood," I said. "I've lived here nearly a decade. I've mowed my lawn, paid every bill, helped neighbors with their gutters. I'm proud of where I live." A few people nodded. "What I'm not proud of," I continued, "is how this rule came to be. It wasn't passed legally. There was no quorum, and the amendment was never filed with the county clerk. That means every fine, mine included, was issued without proper authority." A murmur spread again, louder this time. I held up one of the printed pages. "Here's the attendance record from 2019 for members, when the bylaws require 6. Here's the clerk's statement confirming no record of filing. I'm not here to make trouble. I just believe that rules should be followed by everyone, even the HOA itself." Dennis cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, we appreciate your perspective." "With respect," I interrupted gently. "This isn't about perspective. It's about process. If the board can skip a vote or forget to file paperwork, then what stops any other rule from being questioned?" The room was quiet now. A few heads turned toward the board. Brenda looked uneasy, and one of the newer members whispered something to her. Then Martha, the elderly neighbor who'd supported me before, spoke from the back. "He's right. If the rule wasn't passed legally, it shouldn't exist. Let's vote to remove it altogether." That started a ripple of applause, small, hesitant, but real. Dennis looked around, clearly realizing the tide had turned. "All right," he said. "We'll take a motion." A man in the front row raised his hand. "I move that we strike Section 7B completely." A woman seconded. Dennis sighed. "Very well. All in favor." Hands went up, one after another, then almost the entire room. Only 2 stayed down. When Dennis finally said, "Motion carried," the room broke into quiet clapping. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. After the meeting ended, several neighbors came over to shake my hand. Brian grinned. "You just did what nobody else had the guts to do, Tom." Martha patted my shoulder. "Sometimes all it takes is one person to read the fine print." I smiled and thanked them, but inside, I just felt relief. Not triumph, just the warm, quiet satisfaction of something being made right. Later that night, Linda and I sat on the porch, listening to the crickets. The air was soft and still, the kind that makes you forget time. "So that's it?" she asked. "That's it," I said. "No more fines. The rule's gone." She smiled. "I hope they learned something." "Maybe they did," I said. "Or maybe they'll just write another rule next month. But at least now they'll think twice before doing it in the dark." We both laughed, and for the first time, it felt like the neighborhood belonged to us again. Not to some faceless committee, but to the people who actually lived there. Out by the driveway, the RV shimmered faintly under the porch light. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was proof, quiet, unmoving proof, that fairness still had a place in even the most rigid neighborhoods. A week after the vote, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder, not busier, just lighter. When I walked the dog past the clubhouse that Saturday morning, the door stood open. Inside, Dennis and 2 other board members were sorting through folders. They nodded when they saw me. No tension, no fake smiles, just a quiet acknowledgement, the kind that says, "We've all learned something." I didn't stop to talk. I just waved and they waved back. That was enough. That afternoon, Linda and I washed the RV together. The sun was warm, the hose water cool against our hands. A light breeze moved through the palm trees, and the sky stretched endless and blue. "You know," she said, scrubbing one of the side mirrors, "I think this thing looks happier now." I laughed. "I think I do too." We both stood back and admired it, not as a symbol of defiance, but of peace, of patience, of standing your ground without losing your calm. Ambient note, the soft trickle of water on concrete, a few birds calling from a distance. That evening, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It wasn't a fine this time. It was short and polite. "Mr. Walker, the board acknowledges your effort in clarifying the procedural issues with Section 7B. We appreciate your cooperation and your respect for the community. Please consider joining the advisory committee for next term." I smiled as I read it. Linda raised an eyebrow when I showed her. "Gonna join them?" "Maybe," I said, "but only if they let me bring coffee and common sense." We both laughed, soft, tired laughter that came from relief, not victory. Narration cue. Slower pacing, lower tone, bedtime rhythm. That night, the air outside felt unusually still. The orange glow from the streetlights painted long shadows across the driveway. I stepped outside one last time, barefoot on the cool pavement, just to look at the RV. It gleamed quietly under the porch light, steady, content, almost alive in its stillness. The kind of stillness you earn after standing through a storm. I leaned against the wooden post, listening to the faint rustle of palm leaves, and thought about how small the whole thing seemed now. A few weeks ago, it had felt enormous, overwhelming, unfair. Now, it was just another story in a long life full of little battles and small victories. Linda called softly from inside. "You coming to bed?" "Yeah," I said, still watching the quiet street. "I'm coming." As I turned off the porch light, the neighborhood slipped into shadow, peaceful, warm, and perfectly ordinary again. And for the first time in a long while, I fell asleep knowing that doing the right thing didn't have to mean fighting. Sometimes, it just meant staying calm long enough for the truth to rise to the surface, like light finding its way through still water.